Document. Part 1. Karoline Leavitt lived in a small but cozy apartment on the 5th floor of a brick building in New York City. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, a place where she could unwind after long days chasing stories as an investigative journalist. Her desk was cluttered with notebooks, pens, and stacks of research papers. A corkboard hung on one wall, covered with photos, newspaper clippings, and sticky notes scribbled with ideas for future articles. Karoline loved her work. She thrived on uncovering secrets that others wanted to keep hidden. On a chilly Tuesday morning, something unusual happened. As Karoline returned from grabbing coffee at her favorite cafe down the street, she found an envelope slipped under her door. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, plain white, no return address, and her name written neatly in block letters across the front. But there was something about it that made her pause. Maybe it was the lack of a stamp or any sign of who might have sent it. Or maybe it was just the way it felt heavier than it should have been for such a thin piece of paper inside. Curiosity got the better of her. She set her coffee cup on the counter and tore open the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message was short, typed in plain black font. You are invited to appear on live television during the next episode of The View. Do not ignore this invitation. Consequences will follow if you refuse. Karoline read the words twice, then a third time. Her heart began to race. What kind of prank was this? Who would send something like this, and why? She turned the paper over, hoping to find more information, but the back was blank. No signature, no explanation. Just those cryptic sentences staring up at her. At first, she laughed nervously. This has to be some kind of joke, she muttered, to herself. But as the minutes passed, the laughter faded, replaced by unease. Something about the tone of the message didn't sit right. It wasn't playful or lighthearted. It was serious, almost threatening. And what did it mean by consequences? That part stuck in her mind like a splinter she couldn't ignore. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Karoline decided to dig deeper. She pulled out her laptop and started searching online for anything related to strange occurrences involving The View. At first, she didn't expect to find much. After all, it was just a popular daytime talk show watched by millions of people every week. How weird could it really be? But as she scrolled through forums and old news articles, patterns began to emerge. There were whispers. Small, fragmented stories shared by former employees, audience members, and even fans of the show. Some claimed that technical glitches during tapings weren't accidental. They described moments when the screen would flicker ominously, or the sound would cut out entirely, leaving eerie silence in its wake. Others talked about audience members fainting mid-show, collapsing without warning as though struck by some invisible force. One story caught Karoline's attention more than the others. A woman named Lisa Martinez had posted on a conspiracy forum years ago, claiming her sister Rachel had disappeared shortly after attending a live taping of The View. According to Lisa, Rachel had been excited to see the show in person, but afterward she stopped answering calls and texts. When family members went to check on her, they found her apartment empty, her belongings still there as if she'd vanished into thin air. Karoline leaned back in her chair, frowning. Could these stories be connected? Was there something darker, lurking behind the bright lights and cheerful chatter of the show? She couldn't shake the feeling that the mysterious envelope was tied to all of this somehow. Across town, another person was dealing with a similar situation. Liam Carter, a software engineer in his early 30s, sat at his kitchen table staring at an identical envelope. Unlike Karoline, Liam wasn't prone to flights of fancy. He preferred logic and facts over wild speculation. So when he saw the message inside, his immediate reaction was skepticism. Whoever wrote this must think I'm gullible, Liam said aloud, shaking his head. Still, he couldn't deny the nagging curiosity gnawing at him. Why target him specifically? He worked for a tech company developing apps, not exactly someone who rubbed elbows with celebrities or media executives. Yet here he was, holding what appeared to be a very real invitation to appear on national television. Liam decided to do a little digging of his own. He fired up his computer and ran a quick search for recent incidents involving The View. 2. His surprise, he stumbled upon the same threads Karoline had found earlier. One post mentioned strange behavior from the hosts themselves, smiles that seemed too perfect, movements that looked almost mechanical. Another commenter joked about how the hosts always seemed to know exactly what to say, as though they were reading from a script written by someone, or something else. The more Liam read, the more unsettled he became. He tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but deep down, he knew there was something off about the whole thing. And now, thanks to the envelope, he was being dragged into whatever mystery surrounded the show. Meanwhile, Grace Bennett was having a completely different reaction to her own copy of the invitation. Grace was a blogger known for her fascination with conspiracies and paranormal phenomena. She lived alone in a tiny studio apartment filled with books, crystals, and posters of UFO sightings. For her, receiving the envelope wasn't alarming. It was thrilling. "This is it," Grace exclaimed, pacing around her room. "This is the big break I've been waiting for." She immediately began filming a video for her YouTube channel, holding up the envelope triumphantly. "Guys, listen to me. Something huge is going on with The View, and I'm pretty sure it involves interdimensional beings or government experiments or both." Her subscribers loved her enthusiasm, though most dismissed her claims as typical Grace hyperbole. But Grace didn't care. She genuinely believed that accepting the invitation would lead her straight to the truth. Whatever was happening behind the scenes of the show, she intended to expose it to the world. As the day of the taping approached, Karoline, Liam, and Grace prepared in their own ways. Karoline spent hours reviewing everything she'd uncovered, trying to anticipate what might happen once she stepped foot in the studio. Liam double-checked his phone and laptop, ensuring he could record everything discreetly in case things took a turn for the worse. Grace, meanwhile, packed a bag full of gadgets she thought might come in handy. Everything from audio recorders to electromagnetic field detectors. None of them realized yet that their paths were about to cross in ways none of them could have predicted. All three were heading toward the same destination, driven by a mix of fear, curiosity, and determination. Little did they know, the stage was set for a revelation that would change everything they thought they knew about reality and the true nature of The View. By the time the sun rose on the morning of the taping, each of them felt a growing sense of dread mingled with excitement. They didn't know what awaited them inside the studio, but one thing was certain. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be ordinary. The group moved quickly through the city, sticking to quieter streets and alleys to avoid drawing attention. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was beginning to wear off, leaving them exhausted but alert. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. They knew they couldn't let their guard down, not even for a moment. Grace led the way, her phone clutched tightly in one hand as she navigated toward her friend's apartment. She hadn't seen Mia Torres in months, but she trusted her implicitly. Mia had once worked for a research team investigating unexplained phenomena before corporate funding cuts forced her into early retirement. Since then, she'd kept a low profile, occasionally consulting with private investigators or journalists looking for answers to strange cases. If anyone could help them make sense of what they'd uncovered, it was Mia. When they finally arrived at Mia's building, a modest brick structure tucked away in a residential neighborhood, Grace hesitated outside the door. "She might think we're crazy," Grace admitted, glancing at Karoline and Liam. "But if she believes us, she'll know exactly what to do." Karoline gave her an encouraging nod. "We don't have much choice. Let's just hope she's willing to listen." Liam adjusted the strap of his backpack, which now contained the laptop with the stolen data. "If she doesn't believe us, we'll show her the footage. That should convince her." Grace knocked on the door, and after a few moments, it opened, just wide enough for Mia to peek out. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her sharp eyes scanned the group suspiciously. "Grace?" she asked, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" "It's complicated," Grace said nervously. "Can we come in? Please, it's important." Mia hesitated but eventually stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Her small apartment was cluttered but cozy, filled with books, papers, and strange artifacts collected during her years of research. A corkboard on one wall displayed photos, maps, and handwritten notes connected by strings, a visual representation of some ongoing project. Once inside, Grace launched into an explanation, speaking rapidly as she recounted everything that had happened. The mysterious envelopes, the strange events at the View, the discovery of the underground room, and the horrifying footage they'd uncovered. Mia listened intently, her expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "You're telling me these beings are using a TV show to influence people?" Mia asked when Grace finished. "That sounds insane, even for me." "We thought so, too," Karoline interjected. "But we saw it with our own eyes. And this isn't just about the show, it's bigger than that. These things feed on fear and attention. If we don't stop them, who knows how far they'll go." Mia crossed her arms, thinking. "Show me the evidence," she said finally. Liam pulled out his laptop and played the video clip they'd retrieved from the server. As the footage unfolded, showing the vortex and the scientists' failed experiment, Mia's face grew pale. When the clip ended, she sat down heavily on the edge of her couch. "This is bad," she murmured. "Really bad. Do you recognize any of this?" Karoline asked, "Have you ever seen anything like it before?" Mia nodded slowly. "There are legends, old ones, stories about entities that exist between dimensions, feeding on human emotions. People used to call them parasites of perception, but I always thought they were myths." "Well, they're not myths," Liam said grimly, "and they're here, right now." Mia stood up, pacing across the room. "If what you're saying is true, then we're dealing with something incredibly dangerous. These beings aren't just observing us, they're infiltrating our world. Once they gain enough power, they won't need the show anymore. They'll spread everywhere." "So what do we do?" Grace asked anxiously. "How do we stop them?" Mia stopped pacing and turned to face them. "First, we expose them. If people know the truth, they'll stop watching the show. Without an audience, these things lose their foothold. But they'll come after us," Karoline pointed out. "They already tried to silence Donna. What makes you think we'll be safe?" "We won't be," Mia admitted. "But we don't have a choice. If we run, they'll find us eventually. Our only chance is to fight back, and fast." The group agreed to split tasks. Liam would work on decrypting the rest of the files they'd taken from the studio, searching for anything else that might give them an edge. Grace would edit the footage into a coherent video they could release online, while Karoline drafted a statement explaining everything they'd discovered. Mia offered to dig through her archives, hoping to find references to similar incidents or possible weaknesses in the being's abilities. As they worked, tension hung heavy in the air. The hum they'd heard in the tunnels lingered faintly in their minds, a reminder of how close they'd come to being caught. None of them spoke, much each focused on their task. Outside, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the danger lurking beneath its surface. Hours passed and progress was slow but steady. Liam managed to uncover more details about the experiments conducted by the network's founders. According to the documents, the beings, referred to as the hosts, had promised wealth and fame in exchange for access to humanity's collective consciousness. Over time, the arrangement spiraled out of control, with the host growing stronger and more demanding. Meanwhile, Grace pieced together a chilling montage of the footage, adding captions and commentary to guide viewers through the story. She included clips of the host's unnaturally perfect behavior, the flickering screen, and Donna's disappearance, tying it all together with the video of the vortex. By the time she finished, the video was both terrifying and undeniable proof of what was happening. Karoline struggled with her statement, unsure how to convey the gravity of the situation without sounding unhinged. Finally, she settled on straightforward language, laying out the facts clearly and concisely. She emphasized the importance of turning away from the show and urged viewers to share the video widely. By late afternoon, they were ready. Mia reviewed their work, offering suggestions to strengthen their message. "This is good," she said, nodding approvingly. "It's clear, concise, and impossible to ignore. Now we just need to get it out there." Grace uploaded the video to her YouTube channel, setting it to go live in 10 minutes. To boost visibility, she shared the link across social media platforms, tagging influencers and news outlets in the hopes of reaching as many people as possible. Liam monitored the upload process, ensuring it wouldn't be flagged or removed prematurely. As the timer counted down, the group gathered around Mia's laptop holding their breath. When the video went live, comments began flooding in almost immediately. Some viewers dismissed it as a hoax, while others expressed shock and disbelief. But as the minutes ticked by, the tone shifted. More and more people started sharing their own stories, strange experiences during tapings, missing loved ones, eerie coincidences surrounding the show. Within an hour, the video had gone viral. News channels picked up the story, debating whether it was legitimate or an elaborate prank. Protesters gathered outside the studio building, demanding answers. Calls poured into the network, overwhelming switchboards. For the first time in decades, ratings for The View plummeted as millions of viewers tuned out. Back at Mia's apartment, the group watched the chaos unfold with a mix of relief and apprehension. They had done what they set out to do, but at what cost? The hosts wouldn't take this lying down. As night fell, the hum returned, louder this time. It seeped through the walls of the apartment, vibrating in their chests. Shadows crept along the edges of the room, twisting and writhing like living things. The laptop screen flickered, displaying static-filled images of the vortex. "They're angry," Mia whispered, gripping the armrest of her chair. "And they're coming for us." Karoline clenched her fists, determination hardening her features. "Then we'll be ready." The battle wasn't over yet. The tunnels beneath the studio were dark and damp, their walls lined with exposed pipes and wires. Faint echoes of dripping water filled the silence as Karoline, Liam, and Grace moved cautiously forward. None of them spoke much at first, their minds still reeling from what they had just witnessed. The sight of Donna Hayes dissolving into smoke replayed in Karoline's mind like a nightmare she couldn't shake. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting shadowy figures to appear behind them. Liam led the way, his phone's flashlight cutting through the gloom. He was focused, scanning the walls for anything unusual. His tech-savvy instincts told him there had to be some kind of control center down here, something that explained how those beings, or the hosts, as Grayson called them, were manipulating the show. Every so often he stopped to inspect a junction box or panel, but most of it seemed ordinary. Still, he didn't give up. If there was a clue hidden somewhere, he was determined to find it. Grace brought up the rear, clutching her camera tightly. She hadn't stopped recording since they entered the tunnels, convinced that every second of footage could hold vital evidence. Her excitement was tempered by fear, though. For all her talk about interdimensional beings, she hadn't fully grasped how terrifying they might actually be until now. The shadows on the studio walls, the distorted images on the screen, they weren't just theories anymore. They were real, and they were hunting. After several minutes of walking, the group came across a heavy metal door marked with a faded sign that read, "Restricted Access." Liam tried the handle, but it was locked. Without hesitation, he pulled out a small multi-tool from his pocket and began working on the lock. "This place feels important," he muttered, his voice low. "If we're going to figure out what's going on, this is probably where we'll find answers." Karoline nodded, her eyes darting nervously around the tunnel. "Just hurry up, okay? I don't want to stick around here any longer than we have to." It took Liam less than a minute to pick the lock. With a soft click, the door swung open, revealing a cramped room filled with old equipment. Monitors blinked faintly, displaying static-filled screens, while tangled cords snaked across the floor. In the center of the room stood a large server rack, its lights blinking steadily despite the dust covering its surface. "This must be it," Liam said, stepping inside. He immediately went to work, connecting his laptop to one of the ports on the server. Lines of code scrolled across his screen as he accessed the system. "There's encrypted data here," he explained, typing furiously. "If I can crack it, we might learn something useful." While Liam worked, Karoline explored the rest of the room. She noticed a stack of folders tucked away in a corner, their edges yellowed with age. Pulling one out, She flipped it open and gasped. Inside were detailed reports and photographs documenting experiments conducted decades ago. According to the documents, the creators of the View had made contact with an unknown entity, or entities, and struck a deal. In exchange for unparalleled success and influence, the network agreed to allow these beings to use the show as a gateway to observe humanity. "They've been doing this for years," Karoline whispered, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. "These hosts, they've been feeding off our attention, our emotions. That's why the show became such a phenomenon." Grace stepped closer, peering over Karoline's shoulder. "So you're saying this whole time, people tuned in because they were being manipulated, like hypnotized or something?" "Exactly," Karoline replied. "And anyone who got too close to the truth, like Donna, ended up disappearing. Or worse." Before they could discuss it further, Liam let out a triumphant sound. "I'm in," he announced. On his screen, files began downloading rapidly. One folder caught his attention. It contained blueprints of the studio, along with notes about hidden chambers and underground passageways. But what really stood out was a series of video clips labeled only with dates and times. "Let's watch one of these," Grace suggested eagerly. Liam hesitated, unsure if it was safe, but curiosity won out. He clicked on the earliest file, and the group gathered around the laptop as the footage played. The video showed a dimly lit room similar to the one they were standing in now. A group of men and women in lab coats stood around a table, discussing something in hushed tones. The center of the frame was a swirling black mass, a vortex of sorts that pulsed rhythmically, almost like it was alive. One of the scientists reached toward it cautiously, only for tendrils of darkness to lash out and engulf him completely. The others screamed, scrambling backward as the vortex grew larger, consuming everything in its path. The clip ended abruptly, leaving the three of them speechless. Grace broke the silence first. "Okay, yeah, that's not creepy at all." "We need to get this information out," Karoline said firmly. "If people see this, they'll understand what's really going on. Maybe then we can stop them." But Liam shook his head. "Not yet. If we upload this now, they'll track us instantly. We need to wait until we're far enough away from here." As they debated their next move, a faint noise echoed through the tunnels, a low, guttural hum that sent chills down their spines. It sounded like whispers, overlapping and indecipherable, growing louder with each passing second. "They're coming," Grace whispered, gripping her camera tighter. "We need to go. Now." Without another word, the group grabbed what they could carry and hurried back into the tunnels. The hum followed them, reverberating off the walls and seeming to close in from all sides. Shadows danced eerily in the corners of their vision, though none of them dared to look directly at them. Whatever these beings were, they thrived on attention and fear. They ran blindly through the maze of passages, their footsteps splashing in puddles as they navigated the twisting corridors. At one point, they passed a side tunnel where the air felt colder, heavier. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly in the darkness. Liam paused briefly to snap a photo, but Karoline tugged on his arm. "No time," she hissed. "Keep moving." Finally, they reached a ladder leading upward. Climbing as quickly as they could, they emerged into an alleyway behind the studio building. The fresh air was a relief, though the sense of danger lingered. Looking back at the structure, they saw no signs of pursuit for now. "We can't stay here," Liam said, glancing around nervously. "They know we're on to them. We need to find somewhere safe to regroup." Karoline nodded. "Agreed, but first we need help. Someone who knows more about this kind of thing." Grace raised her hand tentatively. "I know someone, a friend of mine who used to work in paranormal research. She might believe us. Or at least pretend to." With no better options, they decided to trust Grace's lead. As they made their way through the city streets, the weight of their discovery pressed heavily on them. They had uncovered a conspiracy unlike anything they'd imagined, one that threatened not just the show but potentially the entire world. And though they had escaped for now, they knew the hosts wouldn't give up easily. Somewhere deep within the studio, unseen forces stirred. The vortex pulsed angrily, sensing the breach in its secrecy. Its tendrils stretched outward, seeking the ones who had dared to uncover the truth. For now, the humans had eluded it, but the game was far from over. The day of the taping arrived, and the city buzzed with its usual energy. Karoline woke up early, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. She had spent the previous night going over every detail she could find about the view. But nothing prepared her for what might happen when she stepped into the studio. Still, she dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet professional outfit, a navy blue blazer and black slacks. If this was some kind of trap, she wanted to look confident. As she made her way to the studio, she noticed how quiet the streets felt. It wasn't unusual for New York to have moments of calm, but today it seemed different, almost eerie. The envelope weighed heavily in her bag, a constant reminder of the strange invitation that had brought her here. When she finally arrived at the building, she was surprised to see a small crowd gathered outside. Some held signs supporting their favorite hosts, while others simply looked excited to be part of a live audience. Karoline scanned the faces, wondering if any of them had received an envelope like hers. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Bright lights illuminated the set, and crew members rushed back and forth, making last-minute adjustments. Karoline found her seat near the front, clutching her notebook tightly. She glanced around, trying to spot anyone who seemed out of place or unusually nervous. That's when she noticed him, a man sitting a few rows behind her, tapping nervously on his phone. He looked familiar somehow, though she couldn't quite place him. Liam Carter sat among the audience, feeling increasingly uneasy. He hadn't planned to come alone, but none of his friends took his concerns seriously. "It's just a TV show," they'd said. But Liam knew better. The research he'd done haunted him. Stories of disappearing audience members, strange glitches during broadcasts, it all pointed to something unnatural. As he watched the stage being set up, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. Grace Bennett, on the other hand, was ecstatic. She bounced in her seat, camera in hand, ready to document everything. Her excitement drew curious glances from those around her, but she didn't care. This was her chance to prove all her theories right. She whispered to herself, "If there are interdimensional beings involved, I'll catch them on tape." The show began as usual, with the hosts exchanging cheerful banter. They joked about current events, shared personal anecdotes, and promoted upcoming guests. Everything seemed normal. Too normal, in fact. Karoline leaned forward, studying their expressions closely. There was something off about their smiles, something mechanical in the way they moved. Their laughter sounded forced, almost rehearsed. Then came the moment that changed everything. Midway through the segment, one of the hosts turned to the audience and announced, "We have a special guest joining us today." Cameras panned across the room before settling on Karoline. She froze, her heart pounding. How did they know she was here? Was this part of the plan? Reluctantly, Karoline stood and walked toward the stage. The audience clapped politely, but she barely heard them. Her mind raced as she took her seat beside the panel. Up close, the hosts looked even stranger. Their eyes darted around too quickly, and their movements were unnervingly precise. Karoline forced a smile, trying to mask her growing unease. "So, Karoline," one of the hosts said, her voice overly sweet, "what brings you here today?" Karoline hesitated, then decided to take a risk. "Actually, I've been looking into some interesting rumors about this show," she said, choosing her words carefully. "There are stories about people disappearing after attending tapings. Do you think there's any truth to that?" The room fell silent. The host's smile faltered for a split second before returning wider than ever. "Oh, that's quite the imagination you have there," she replied, laughing lightly. "Nothing like that has ever happened on our set." But Karoline wasn't convinced. She pressed on. "What about technical issues during broadcasts? Some say they're not accidental." Before the host could respond, the screen behind them flickered violently. For a brief moment, distorted images appeared, shadowy figures standing just beyond the edge of the frame. Gasps rippled through the audience as whispers spread. Did you see that? Someone murmured nearby. Who are they? Panic surged through Karoline. She glanced at the hosts whose composure was beginning to crack. One of them shifted uncomfortably in her chair, while another stared blankly ahead as if frozen. Then, without warning, Donna Hayes, one of the senior hosts, spoke. It's too late, Donna blurted out, her voice trembling. They control us all. The audience erupted into chaos. People jumped to their feet, shouting and pointing at the screen, which now displayed swirling patterns of darkness. Security guards rushed onto the stage, attempting to restore order, but it was clear something was terribly wrong. Donna collapsed, suddenly, her body dissolving into a cloud of black smoke that vanished into thin air. Grace, who had been filming the entire time, zoomed in on the shadows moving across the walls. Her hands shook as she whispered, "This is it. This is proof." Beside her, Liam stared in disbelief, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. These weren't ordinary glitches or accidents. They were signs of something far more sinister. Karoline remained seated, gripping the edge of the table. She realized then that the rumors were true. Something, or someone, was using the view as a gateway to infiltrate human society. The hosts weren't just entertainers. They were puppets, controlled by forces beyond comprehension. As the situation spiraled out of control, Liam noticed something odd about the exits. Guards were stationed at every door, preventing anyone from leaving. "We're trapped," he muttered under his breath. His instincts kicked in, and he began scanning the room for alternative routes. Spotting a maintenance hatch near the back of the studio, he nudged Grace and gestured toward it. "We need to get out of here," he said urgently. Grace nodded, still filming as they slipped away from the commotion. Karoline saw them moving and followed instinctively, sensing they might hold answers she desperately needed. Together, the three of them reached the hatch and pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. The air smelled damp and musty, but they didn't hesitate. Descending into the dimly lit tunnels below, they found themselves surrounded by the hum of machinery and the distant sound of dripping water. For a moment, they stood in silence, catching their breath. Then Grace broke the tension. "Okay, so we're dealing with interdimensional beings. Anybody else feel like we're living in a sci-fi movie?" Liam shook his head. "This isn't fiction anymore. Whatever those things are, they're real and they're dangerous," Karoline agreed. "We need to figure out how they're controlling the show and stop them, but first, we need to survive." As they ventured deeper into the tunnels, the weight of their discovery settled over them. They had uncovered a truth that could change the world, but only if they lived long enough to share it. The shadows in Mia's apartment grew darker, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. The hum that had been building steadily now filled the room, vibrating through the walls and rattling loose objects on shelves. It was as if the very air around them was alive, pulsing with anger. The group huddled together near the center of the room, their eyes darting nervously toward every corner. "We need to move," Liam said urgently, his voice barely audible over the growing noise. "If we stay here, they'll find us." "But where do we go?" Grace asked, clutching her camera tightly. Her hands trembled, but she refused to let go of it. "They're everywhere." Karoline glanced at Mia, who was staring at the swirling shadows with an expression of grim resignation. "Mia, is there anywhere safe? Any place these things can't reach?" Mia hesitated before nodding slowly. "There's a bunker. A friend of mine built it years ago for situations like this. It's shielded against electromagnetic interference and other things, but it's not far from here. We'll have to run." Without wasting another second, they grabbed what little they could carry, the laptop, Grace's camera, and a few essential supplies, and hurried out of the apartment. The hallway outside felt colder than before, and the lights flickered erratically as if struggling to stay on. They moved quickly but quietly, sticking close to the walls to avoid drawing attention. As they descended the stairs, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. By the time they reached the ground floor, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on them. The lobby was deserted, though faint whispers echoed in the corners, carrying fragments of words they couldn't quite understand. Karoline shivered as she caught glimpses of distorted figures moving just beyond her line of sight. She forced herself to focus on the door ahead, refusing to look directly at them. Once outside, the group broke into a sprint, weaving through alleys and side streets to avoid open spaces. The city no longer felt like the bustling hub of activity it usually was. Instead, it seemed eerily quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Streetlights buzzed and dimmed as they passed, casting long, jagged shadows that stretched unnaturally across the pavement. After several tense minutes, they arrived at the location Mia had mentioned, a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town. Its exterior was weathered and unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the industrial surroundings. Mia approached a heavy metal door and entered a code into a keypad hidden beneath a rusted panel. With a loud click, the door swung open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. "Hurry," Mia urged, ushering them inside. As soon as they were all through, she closed the door behind them and locked it securely. The sound of the bolt sliding into place brought a small measure of relief, though none of them truly believed they were safe yet. The bunker was surprisingly spacious, equipped with basic amenities like beds, a generator, and a stockpile of food and water. Along one wall stood racks of tools and gadgets, many of which looked custom-made. In the center of the room was a large table covered in maps, blueprints, and notes, evidence of Mia's meticulous planning. "This should hold them off for a while," Mia explained, gesturing to the reinforced walls and ceiling. "But it won't stop them forever. They're persistent." Liam immediately set up his laptop, connecting it to a power source and pulling up the data he'd decrypted earlier. "We need to figure out how to sever their connection to our world completely. If we can identify the source, the original gateway, they might be able to close it." Grace paced anxiously, filming everything despite the dire circumstances. What happens if we fail? What if they break through? No one answered right away. The possibility hung heavily in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Finally, Karoline spoke up. "Then we fight. We've exposed the truth and people are starting to wake up. That gives us a chance. A slim one, maybe, but still a chance." For hours, they worked tirelessly, pooling their knowledge and skills, to devise a plan. Using the information Liam had uncovered, they traced the origins of the experiments back to a specific date decades earlier. According to the records, the first contact with the hosts had occurred during a failed broadcast test, a moment when the boundaries between dimensions had briefly weakened. "That must be the key," Liam said, pointing to a section of the blueprint labeled control chamber. "If we can access that room, we might be able to reverse whatever process they used to open the gateway. But getting there won't be easy," Mia warned. "It's deep underground, guarded by systems, designed to keep intruders out. And even if we manage to reach it, we'll only have one shot at shutting it down. We'll make it count," Karoline said firmly. "We don't have any other options." With their plan in place, the group prepared to leave the bunker under cover of darkness. Before stepping out, Mia handed each of them small devices she called signal disruptors. "These will mask your presence for a short time anyway," she explained. "Use them wisely. Once they're activated, you'll have about 10 minutes before the hosts catch on." The journey back to the studio was fraught with danger. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of the world was bearing down on them. The streets were eerily silent, save for the occasional flicker of movement in the shadows. At one point, Liam thought he saw a pair of glowing eyes watching them from a rooftop, but when he turned to look again, they were gone. When they finally reached the building, they slipped inside through a service entrance, avoiding the main lobby where protesters still gathered. The lower levels were deserted, but the hum returned as they descended deeper into the structure. The closer they got to the control chamber, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Reaching the final door, Liam knelt to disable the lock while the others kept watch. His hands moved quickly, sweat dripping from his brow despite the chill in the air. With a soft click, the door opened, revealing a cavernous room dominated by a massive machine at its center. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting the device to terminals lining the walls. Above it all hovered a swirling vortex, identical to the one in the video footage. "This is it," Karoline whispered, her voice trembling. This is how they're doing it. Liam rushed to one of the terminals, typing furiously as he attempted to override the system. I'm initiating a shutdown sequence, he said. But it's going to take a few minutes. Hold them off as long as you can. As if on cue, the shadows began to converge, seeping into the room from every crack and crevice. The hum escalated into a deafening roar, shaking the walls and sending sparks flying from overloaded circuits. Grace raised her camera, capturing the chaos as the hosts materialized fully for the first time. Twisted, amorphous forms that pulsed with malevolent energy. They're here, Grace shouted, backing away instinctively. We need to hurry. Karoline grabbed one of the signal disruptors and activated it, throwing it toward the advancing entities. For a brief moment, the shadows recoiled, retreating into the corners of the room. But the effect didn't last long. One by one, the disruptors depleted, forcing the group to rely on sheer determination to survive. Finally, Liam let out a triumphant shout. Got it! Initiating shutdown. The machine groaned loudly, straining against the command. The vortex contracted violently, its edges sparking and sputtering. Then, with a blinding flash of light, it collapsed entirely, leaving the room plunged into silence. For a moment, no one moved. The oppressive weight that had lingered throughout the ordeal lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. The hosts were gone, or at least cut off from their foothold in this dimension. Well, Grace said weakly, lowering her camera. That was intense. Karoline sank to the floor, exhaustion washing over her. It's over. For now, anyway. Mia nodded solemnly. They'll try again someday. These kinds of beings never give up completely. But for today, we won. As dawn broke over the city, news spread of the events that had transpired. Protesters celebrated outside the studio, their cheers echoing through the streets. Journalists scrambled to piece together the story. While social media lit up with theories and speculation, millions of people vowed never to tune into The View again, determined to protect themselves from similar threats in the future. In the days that followed, Karoline, Liam, Grace, and Mia went into hiding, knowing the hosts would stop at nothing to exact revenge, yet they remained hopeful, buoyed by the knowledge that humanity had fought back and won. Together, they continued documenting their experiences, preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. Though the battle was over, the war was far from finished. But for now, they had taken a stand and reminded the world that even in the face of unimaginable terror, hope could prevail.